Emily Carter had always loved old buildings. Ever since she was a child, she used to stop and stare at old houses with broken windows and cracked walls, imagining what stories they might hold inside. She was now 32, an architect who restored historical homes and gave them a new life. She believed every wall had a memory, and every room had a story waiting to be told. One cold autumn morning, she came across an advertisement that caught her attention. 100-year-old mansion for sale, located on Hillcrest Road, Maplewood Town, needs restoration. Emily clicked on the photos attached. The pictures showed a large, elegant building with tall windows, ivy crawling up its sides, and a grand staircase that led to the front porch. But the house was clearly in bad shape, paint peeling, roof damaged, and the garden wild with weeds. Still, something about it pulled her heart. When she read the price, she couldn't believe it. It was being sold for far less than any property of that size. It almost felt like the seller wanted to get rid of it as soon as possible. Curiosity took over her. She decided to visit the mansion that weekend. The road to Hillcrest was quiet, lined with tall trees that seemed to whisper as the wind passed through. After a few miles, the mansion came into view. It stood on a small hill, surrounded by rusted iron gates and a crumbling stone wall. The building looked both beautiful and sad, like a grand old queen forgotten by time. Emily parked her car outside and walked toward the gate. It creaked loudly as she pushed it open. The moment she stepped inside, she felt a strange chill in the air, not of fear but of deep silence, as if the house had been waiting for someone to return. An old caretaker, Mr. Howard, appeared from behind a tree. His gray hair peeked out from under a flat cap, and his face carried the weight of many years. "You must be the lady interested in the mansion," he said with a shaky voice. "Yes," Emily replied kindly. "I'm Emily Carter. I came to take a look." He nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "This house has been empty for a very long time. People around here don't come close anymore." "Why?" Emily asked, smiling lightly, though she already expected some kind of old town story. The old man sighed. "Some say it's cursed. Others say it's haunted. I don't believe all that nonsense, but—" He paused and looked up at the windows. "There are some things best left alone." Emily thanked him for the warning, but she didn't scare easily. She had heard such stories before. To her, it was just superstition mixed with imagination. When she entered the mansion, the air inside felt thick and still. Dust hung like mist, and the smell of old wood filled her lungs. She took slow steps across the marble floor, her shoes echoing in the silence. The entrance hall was huge, with a grand staircase leading to the upper floor. A crystal chandelier hung above, covered in cobwebs, yet still shining faintly when sunlight hit it. Portraits lined the walls, men and women dressed in old-fashioned clothes. Staring down at her with serious faces, Emily felt a shiver run through her, not from fear, but from the strange feeling that she was not entirely alone. Room after room she explored. Each one told a silent story. A dining room with broken chairs, a library with torn books, a piano room with a missing key. Every step made the house feel more alive. But then, as she climbed to the second floor, she noticed something strange at the end of the long hallway. A single door completely sealed with wooden boards and rusted nails. Unlike the others, it was clean, almost too clean, as if someone had tried to keep it untouched. She stood in front of it for a while. The door gave off a heavy feeling, one that made her heart beat faster. She gently touched one of the boards, but the wood didn't move. "What's behind this door?" she whispered to herself. Over the next few days, Emily couldn't stop thinking about that door. She bought the property and began her work. Local workers helped her clean the gardens and repair the walls. But every evening after everyone left, she wandered through the silent halls, her eyes always drawn to that locked door upstairs. The townspeople noticed her interest and began to warn her again. One woman at the local cafe told her, "Miss, that mansion holds a sad story. Years ago, something happened there. Something no one wants to talk about." But no one ever explained clearly what it was. Every time Emily asked, they simply shook their heads or changed the subject. One evening, Mr. Howard visited her again to drop off old blueprints of the mansion. He seemed uneasy. "Miss Carter," he said slowly, "you're a good woman. But please promise me you won't try to open that room." Emily looked at him with gentle eyes. "Why? Do you know what's in there?" He stared down at the floor. "No one knows for sure. My father used to work here when he was young. He said that door has been sealed for almost 100 years. No one dared to open it. Not even when the last owner lived here. Every time someone tried, strange things happened. Noises, broken tools, accidents. They said the house didn't want that door touched. Emily smiled, trying to ease his fear. Maybe it's just a storage room. Or maybe it's where the real history of this house is waiting to be found. Mr. Howard sighed deeply. Be careful, miss. Sometimes the past doesn't want to be disturbed. Days turned into weeks. The restoration work continued, and the mansion slowly began to look alive again. Emily polished the floors, cleaned the walls, and fixed the windows. The house, which once looked like a ghost, now started to glow under the soft touch of her effort. But her curiosity about the locked room grew stronger. Every night she walked by that hallway, her eyes drawn to the door as if it was silently calling her name. One night, a storm hit Maplewood. Rain lashed against the windows and thunder rolled across the sky. Emily sat near the fireplace reading an old diary she had found in the library. It belonged to the mansion's former owner, a man named Charles Whitmore. Most of his writings were about daily life, business, travels, and family events. But one line caught her attention. No one must enter the East Room. Let it remain sealed until the day truth finds its voice again. Her heart raced. The East Room, that had to be the one. Just then, a loud sound echoed from upstairs, like something falling or a door creaking open. She froze for a moment, listening. Then she took a candle and carefully climbed the staircase. The house moaned with every gust of wind. When she reached the hallway, the flame flickered. The sealed door stood there, still shut, but she could swear she heard a faint sound, soft, almost like piano keys being pressed gently. She stood still, holding her breath. It's just the wind, she told herself, but deep down she wasn't sure. The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds. Emily returned to the library to continue her cleaning. While moving some books, one shelf felt unusually heavy. When she pressed on one of the wooden panels, it shifted slightly. Her heart jumped. There was a small hidden compartment behind it. Inside, wrapped in a piece of old velvet cloth, was a tiny brass key. The metal was cold, but when she held it up to the light, she saw an engraving that sent a shiver through her. For the one who dares. Emily stared at the key for a long time. It was beautiful and strange, as if it had been waiting for her. She looked up toward the staircase. The sealed door suddenly felt closer than ever, like it was aware of her discovery. For the rest of the day, she couldn't concentrate. The words, "for the one who dares," kept repeating in her mind. That evening, as the sun began to set behind the trees, she stood in front of the door once again. She held the brass key tightly in her hand. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from a feeling she couldn't explain. A mix of excitement, wonder, and a strange sense of destiny. "I'll find out what you're hiding," she whispered softly, but she didn't open it that night. Instead, she walked back downstairs and sat near the window, staring at the mansion's garden bathed in moonlight. She knew that behind that door lay something more than dust and darkness, perhaps a story that had been waiting 100 years to be heard. And Emily Carter, the woman who believed every old house carried a soul, was finally ready to listen. The night after Emily found the brass key, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the locked door in her mind, standing at the end of the hallway, silent and waiting. The words engraved on the key echoed in her thoughts. For the one who dares. By morning, her curiosity had turned into determination. The storm had cleared and sunlight poured gently through the windows, filling the mansion with a soft golden glow. She took a deep breath, held the small key in her hand, and whispered to herself, "It's time." She climbed the staircase slowly. The air upstairs felt different that morning, lighter, almost welcoming. The old floorboards creaked beneath her feet, and the shadows danced across the faded wallpaper. When she reached the sealed door, she stood there for a few seconds, her heart beating fast. The boards nailed across it looked old and weak. She fetched a small hammer and carefully began to remove them one by one. Each board came loose with a long groan, like the house was sighing in relief. When the final board dropped to the floor, she stepped back and stared at the door. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the brass key into the lock. To her surprise, it turned easily, as if it had been waiting all this time just for her. The door opened slowly, its hinges crying out after so many years. The room beyond was not dark and ruined like she expected. Instead, it was filled with soft light from a window half covered with lace curtains. Dust floated in the air like tiny golden stars. Everything inside seemed untouched by time. The furniture, the books, even the faint scent of old perfume that lingered. In the center of the room stood a small wooden piano, its surface covered with a delicate lace cloth. Beside it was a desk filled with letters, an ink bottle, and an old quill. On the wall hung a large portrait of a young woman dressed in a white gown, her hair tied neatly behind her shoulders. Her face was calm but sad, and to Emily's shock, she looked exactly like her. Emily stepped closer, her eyes wide. "That can't be possible," she whispered. The resemblance was too strong, the same eyes, same soft smile. For a moment she felt like the woman in the painting was looking back at her. She reached out and brushed away a thin layer of dust from the painting's frame. At the bottom, a small name was engraved: Eleanor Whitmore. 1894, Whitmore. The same last name she'd seen in the diaries of Charles Whitmore, the mansion's former owner. Emily felt a strange connection forming inside her chest. "Who are you, Eleanor?" she murmured. She spent the rest of the morning exploring the room. Everything seemed to have a purpose. A diary on the bedside table, books neatly stacked on the shelves, and a wooden chest in the corner covered in velvet fabric. When she opened the chest, she found it filled with letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. Each envelope was old and fragile, but the ink was still readable. The handwriting was neat, full of emotion. The first letter began with the words, "My dearest Eleanor, I think of you every day. The world feels empty without you. Our love must stay hidden for now, but I promise I will come back for you soon. Forever yours, Henry." Emily sat down on the floor and read for hours. The letters told the story of a young woman, Eleanor, and a man named Henry who had fallen deeply in love. But their love was forbidden. Eleanor's father, Charles Whitmore, was a strict man who believed his daughter should marry someone of wealth and power. Henry was a school teacher, kind but poor. The letters spoke of secret meetings in the garden, promises whispered under the old oak tree, and dreams of escaping together. But as Emily read the final few letters, her heart ached. Henry had written about being sent away to another town and how he would return to take Eleanor with him. The last letter ended suddenly with a few smudged words. "I will come back for you on the 14th. Wait for me." There were no letters after that. Emily felt tears sting her eyes. The love story had ended without closure. She could imagine Eleanor waiting for Henry in that very room, staring out the window day after day. Perhaps he never returned. Perhaps something happened that no one ever told. She gently touched the piano keys. A soft note echoed through the room. Even after so many years, the sound was clear. It was as if the room itself had been frozen in time, protecting Eleanor's memory. Suddenly, Emily noticed something else on the desk, a small golden locket covered in dust. She opened it carefully and gasped. Inside was a tiny photo of the same man from the letters and a lock of brown hair pressed neatly beside it. The back of the locket carried an engraving, "Together in another life." Her hands trembled as she held it close. The feeling in the room changed. It was no longer sad but warm, as though Eleanor's spirit was silently thanking her for finding the truth. That evening, Emily sat near the window of the east room, reading Eleanor's diary she had found hidden inside one of the drawers. The entries were gentle and poetic. Eleanor had written about her dreams, her love for Henry, and the growing fear of her father discovering their secret. One of the final entries read, "Father has locked me inside this room until I promise to forget him. But how can I forget my own heart? I can hear Henry's voice in the wind. I will wait, even if it takes forever." Emily closed the diary and looked out the window, her heart heavy. She now understood why no one dared to open this room. It was not haunted by anger or fear, but by love and sadness that had never been set free. She decided that night to restore the room exactly as it was, as a tribute to Eleanor. She cleaned every corner gently, polished the furniture, and placed the locket on the piano. As she worked, she hummed softly to herself, unaware that outside, the wind carried her voice through the trees, the same way it once carried Eleanor's. Over the next few weeks, Emily's project changed. She was no longer just fixing a house. She was healing it. The mansion began to feel alive again. The air felt warmer, the rooms brighter, and sometimes, She could even smell the faint fragrance of roses, Eleanor's favorite flower. According to her diary, one night after finishing a long day of work, Emily sat at the piano in Eleanor's room. She pressed a few keys and began to play a soft melody she remembered from her childhood. The sound filled the room beautifully. Halfway through, she paused. She could hear another faint sound, almost like someone quietly playing along with her. The notes matched hers perfectly. For a moment, she froze, her eyes widening in wonder. The air around her felt calm and peaceful, not frightening at all. She smiled softly. "It's okay, Eleanor," she whispered. "You're home." A few months later, when the mansion's restoration was complete, Emily decided to open it for visitors as a historical site. People from the town came to see the transformation. They were amazed to see how the once-forgotten house had turned into a place of beauty and light. Some visitors said they felt a gentle presence in the east room, a comforting warmth, as if someone unseen was welcoming them. Others noticed the piano occasionally playing a soft tune when no one was near it. Emily never spoke of these things to anyone. She didn't need to explain. She knew that Eleanor's spirit was finally at peace. One afternoon, while giving a tour to a small group, an old woman approached her quietly. She said she was the granddaughter of one of the Whitmore servants. "My grandmother used to talk about this house," the woman said softly. She said Miss Eleanor was the kindest person she'd ever known. "When Eleanor disappeared, my grandmother said her father locked that room and ordered no one to open it again." Emily nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "She didn't disappear," she said gently. "She stayed here, waiting for someone to remember her story." The woman smiled through tears. "Then I suppose she can rest now." That evening, after everyone left, Emily walked through the mansion alone. The golden sunset painted the walls in warm colors. She made her way upstairs to Eleanor's room one last time. She stood by the window looking at the garden below, the same garden where Eleanor once waited. A cool breeze brushed against her face. The piano behind her played a single soft note, though no one was near it. Emily turned and smiled. "Goodbye, Eleanor," she whispered. "Your story will never be forgotten." She gently closed the door behind her, not with boards or locks, but with peace. From that day onward, the mansion was known not as the haunted Whitmore house, but as the House of the Waiting Heart. People came not to fear it, but to feel the warmth of its story, a story of love that had waited 100 years to be found. And every now and then, late at night, if one listened closely, a soft piano melody could still be heard drifting through the halls, the sound of a promise finally kept.